Hi, I'm here to answer some of your decanting questions. I've had lots. Firstly, if you haven't watched my first video on decanting young reds, why and how, please watch that. It's short and useful, hopefully. But I've got here some comments that have been left on the YouTube videos that I just wanted to answer for you. So the first one was, oxidized wine, how long can you leave it open for? Answer is it absolutely depends on the wine that we're talking about. If we're talking about this Pinot, I wouldn't do it for more than a couple of hours in a decanter. If we're talking about those Standish Shiraz that I reviewed last week, they were still looking good after 6 days open. So it really does depend on the tannic structure of the wines. The more tannin, often the more oak, the longer the wine will stay fresh for. The fresher, the brighter, the finer the wine, the less time you have to drink it. And we're talking here about young wines. When we talk about older wines, that window is completely different and far, far smaller. And I would almost advise not to decant. I don't like decanting old wines. How old is old? I would say probably 15 years or even 15 years. I would say older than that, don't decant them. Just pour them into the glass and watch them develop. The next question is the method for the double decant. That is in the video that I just referenced, but essentially what you're doing is pouring wine out of the bottle into the decanter and back into the bottle again. Get a better tool than the one that I've got. This is just a cheap plastic funnel, but certainly A, you need to upgrade. B, if you're using something like this, make sure it's very clean. Voila. The oxygen is now in the wine itself. Whether you put the cork in or not, or the cap on or not, this wine will now start the oxygenation process. So just be aware of that. Once you have opened it, put oxygen into it and put it back into the bottle. There's nothing more you can do with it then. The next question was, how long do I normally decant wine for? It really, really varies. It varies depending on the variety, how old the wine is, and when I want to drink it. So if I'm drinking a young Cabernet for dinner tonight, it's 9 a.m. in the morning now, I would probably open the bottle, say it's a 2018, in 2022, it's 4 years old, I would open it about 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. even. I mean, it really doesn't need a full day to open up. What we want is for the tannins to soften and really melt into the fruit. If you imagine tannins and fruit in wine like a good Wagyu steak, what you want is a fine marble. That marbling fat that is in the flesh of Wagyu steaks is exactly how we should be thinking about tannins. And what decanting does is it just melts those tannins into the fruit and it softens it and brings it together. Exactly like cooking a good steak. It's just the same thing with decanting red wine. The next question is, how long for different vintages and wines? Look, how long's a piece of string? There's no right answer and there's no wrong answer, because at the end of the day, it really does depend on how we like to drink wine ourselves. However, if I'm decanting wine that's, say, within 5 years old, so from 2017 in 2022 to now, I would be decanting those Shiraz in that period, and depending again on how tannic, whether it's cool or warm climate, I'd be doing that for at the very least an hour. And depending on the producer, longer or shorter than that. It depends on the food that you're having it with, the texture that you like. I enjoy wine at all stages, and I like to see it once it's open. So I always open the bottle and taste the wine immediately, because I like to capture that first spike of flavour. You often get more there than you get later. And once that's gone, you can't see it again. So I like to look at it then, and then again, an hour or two later. So really do just measure the wine as you go, open it, try it again in an hour. You'll learn from it, you'll make mistakes. You'll open them too early, you'll open them too late, you'll work it out. The good bit about opening it too late is you can put it back and forth in decanters, like I showed you in that last video, back and forth, back and forth. That really does help open up the wine, which leads actually into the next question, which is, will decanting be a substitute for aging? No. We age wine for two reasons. One, to soften it like we do with decanting. So in that sense, yes, decanting will assist in softening the wine and allowing it to open up. But nothing can substitute really well stored aged wine, because characters creep into the wine over time that we can't emulate simply by decanting. This is what we call, when we talk about primary fruit and tertiary characters, Primary fruit is like all of the raw fruit that we have. So raspberries, pomegranates, cranberries, blood plums, plums, apples, you name it, that's in there. All of those primary characters, it's like primary colours. They are colours that are in their purest form, that are not mixed with any other colours to make secondary colours. Pink's a secondary colour, red's a primary colour. You can't make red with any other colour other than what it is. And it's the same with primary flavours. You can't make a raspberry from anything other than it being a raspberry. But once we have an older wine, those primary characters morph into older, more savoury, more tertiary characters. When we look at things like tobacco leaf or cigar box or pencil shavings, you might look at those bits and go, what are they talking about? Well, they're the spicy edges to the tasting notes that indicate the wine has a little bit of age and a little bit of complexity, and that's what age introduces to a wine, complexity. If we look at a long spectrum, aging will rob the wine of primary fruit. It is very rare that you have a very old wine that still has primary fruit. And when you see wine writers say, my God, it was still primary, it's 20 years old, 30 years, 40, it's still primary. It's an amazing wine to be holding its primary characters for that long. But you will always get tertiary spice characters. And this is when you go, instead of, a fresh peach, you might say peach brulee or a poached peach or a baked peach. These are very different flavours. They're still peach, but you have to do something else to it to create that flavour. So these are things you get with aging that you won't get with decanting, but decanting will certainly assist with texture, tannin, and actually, because it does open the fruit up a little bit, it does give it a little bit of softness and cushioning. And certainly I find this with young Chardonnay. If it's a big Chardonnay with lots of oak or very powerful, like some of the Margaret River Chardonnays with ginger clone, they're big. Sometimes they can really benefit from a decant, especially if they're only a couple of years old. So you really should play around with it. Decant everything, see what it looks like. Generally, a rule of thumb is if it's been in oak, it will probably respond relatively well to a decant. If it hasn't been in oak, I would suggest it probably doesn't need a decant. That's usually a brighter, fresher drink now wine anyway, and it won't necessarily benefit from any additional oxygen. So I hope that helps. If you have more questions, send them through to me. I'll do my best to answer them. And in the meantime, decant away. There's lots of things to learn.